money on using for things like
That is.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
I've been writing sponsorship packages and grant applications for so long, and you get stuck in.
So it's great to catch up, I'm sure.
Uber from Seattle.
And I'd like to welcome you here and call this meeting of the Community Culture and Environment Advisory Committee for April 11th, 2024 to order. And just before I'm going to call, actually I should have said before I call to order, but I want to welcome Stan Peterson for the school board.
Thank you.
Board of Education. And just for your information, Stan can't vote or make motions today because he's not been ratified by the council yet. So Stan's, just so you know. So keep your hands, sit on your hands, Stan.
Yeah.
But welcome here nonetheless.
Thank you.
First item is the adoption of the revised agenda as noted on, I guess you don't have the sheet I have, but it is revised. We added an item, a culture services update. All right. And a motion to adopt the agenda. Thanks, Matthew. John seconded. All in favor? Carried. Adoption of minutes for February 8th, 2024. I'm assuming everybody's sort of satisfied with them. Motion to, help me out here. And, yeah, turn your signs, please, you know. I know you people, but my brain takes a few milliseconds or whatever to kick in here. Thanks, Ann. Moved by Ann, seconded by Matthew. All in favor? Carried. Great. We're set to go. We've got an agenda of 5 presentations. The first one, 6.1 Planning Development Services Annual Report. What you're going to see is not what you expect. Our apologies. The report that you were sent was the incorrect one. So if you would like a copy of this, it can be sent out to you following this meeting. So just let staff know. So with that, I'll welcome Heather to the podium.
All right.
Welcome, Heather.
Thank you. The presentation does have the correct information in it. So any questions you have, Blake is here. He can probably answer those for you. But I will show you the pretty pictures. All right. This represents the last year, 2023, and it's not advancing for some reason. My slides. Okay, perfect. So this graphic represents land development applications received over the last year. And that includes ALR applications, development permits, subdivisions, rezones, official community plan amendments. You see that it's pretty consistent with the previous year number. It's 195. You can see that top. Is that right? Yeah, 195 is the top number. And the dotted line represents kind of a 5-year annual average on that. So those are received applications. And this represents a couple of examples of notable projects that we received. One on 4-unit on McCallum. We may be seeing more of this kind of development. This represents in-stream residential applications, so ones that haven't been approved yet, but we've received and are working on. And you'll note that there's quite a bit of multifamily units. I think that number is 5,486, and that represents the number of units that are currently being reviewed. The yellow is townhouses, and the gray represents single-family lots that are being developed. That may or may not be single-family, may be more than one unit in the future. And these are some examples of some in-stream residential applications that we received. The one on the left is all residential. The one in the middle has commercial on the bottom, and the one on the right is townhouses.
I live there now.
And then this represents institutional, commercial, and industrial floor areas. So the total number, the total area, floor area increased by over 41% in 2023, and reached a record high of 234,895 square meters, so a record high. In terms of in-stream, also record highs. And this is a couple of our notable approved residential applications. And a couple of our notable ICI applications. In terms of issued building permits, generally on par with the previous annual totals, significant decrease in single family as opposed to multifamily, which is what our OCP has been aiming for. And Brian will speak to that next. And then in terms of construction value, dramatic increase compared to 2022 regarding multifamily. Although annual total construction value decreased by 21 million in 2023 with a total value of 480. As I understand it, we're going back up this year. We're currently, I think, either meeting or exceeding the dollar figures we had anticipated for this year. And then this is a description of some of the projects. McKee Neighborhood Plan was approved last year, which was a big milestone. The sign bylaw was updated. It had been a years-long project. The OCP got underway. The D3 project, which was digitizing our building permit process, also substantially complete. And we underwent a development application process review for planning permits, which will be, a report will be coming out fairly soon on that one. So that was kind of the highlights. Glad to answer any questions.
Great report. I like them. Nice and short.
Awesome.
No, I meant nice and concise.
There you go.
Concise,
All right.
not short. Concise. So, the floor is open. Any questions, comments?
Yeah,
John.
in terms of ICIs, does that include educational buildings? Was there any new applications for schools?
That's a good question. Do we know anything answer that one?
Yeah, there was, schools are contained in that.
Okay,
So an example of that that's contained in there is Margaret Stenderson Elementary School.
Right.
There was 8 classrooms that were added.
Oh, okay, just-
Building permit was added.
sure, additions, because
Issued for that.
we're looking at this vast number of residential units, that are in stream, and then I'm sure the school district spends a lot of time looking at that.
Yeah, we, very much.
Okay. We don't want to fall behind, right?
When it comes to that, when we do our OCP updates, John, the school district is very much involved in that. And at the end of the OCP process, we create a growth model that we share with the various agencies, the school district being one, so they can understand where that growth pressure is going to be, and they can do their planning as well.
Yeah, I assumed that, but again, I didn't see anything there for schools, and I thought, that's
Oh, I see, yeah. Yeah, there were a couple schools, I can't remember the other one, but Margaret Stenderson for sure was in there for 8 classrooms.
Augustin.
Oh, Augustin was the other one, yeah.
Has there been an application yet for beginning the process for a new school up at above McKee, on the McKee corridor? Up West Mountain Road, McKee, there's some school property there.
There's a couple school sites up there, the school's not initiated any
Okay.
capital projects yet.
Okay.
So the schools are in the big other category, 100-something others,
They're under the institutional.
I see,
but there are not, but there are.
Yeah, but
okay,
right.
yeah, they would be.
Thanks.
Yes, Mark,
Just in the meeting package, there was, and I don't know if this is later on, but there was a graph that showed like a decrease in the number of development meetings and a decrease in the number of development applications. Was that, is there a reason, do you think, for that?
It sounds like you might have gotten the wrong report. Is that actually, do we get the
Can
20?
you go back to the beginning of this slide deck?
Okay.
I think there was one that showed the DIMS. I think this is what you might be referring to.
Oh, sorry.
Keep going, there was
This one?
Keep going. It's one of your very first slides, it talked about the number of DIM meetings.
No, I don't.
Right, there has been a decrease in the number of preliminary type meetings that the city is hosting. Generally speaking, we've tried to push those meetings into two different categories. One that actually has a development concept and a development proposal that we then push through that DIM process to give them full kind of design review on the engineering, environmental, and planning side. If they don't have a development concept, then we're trying to answer it at a higher level, and we push that through a counter inquiry or through other staff members and not host those meetings. So I think that's a purposeful kind of revision that we've done administratively, and you're seeing the results now kind of land on the ground.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm wondering about the graph there with the apartments on it. Is there a breakdown as to how much of that is actually rental versus condo?
No, and part of the reason is that it's hard for us to capture that. You know, we try to as much with our permit processes to capture it, but a developer could conceivably decide to make it rental after we're done, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard to capture it. We are making efforts to capture it as best we can, some more with our permitting process, but yeah.
Okay.
Very little of that is rental, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We do have rental coming forward. There's probably 3 or 4 projects in there. Council considered one again this week. So we're seeing a little bit of it, but we don't report out on it because of the reasons Heather mentioned.
Just to clarify that, you're talking about purpose-built rental.
Purpose-built,
yeah. Yes.
So even in a stratified apartment building now, they must be available for rent. A strata can no longer restrict rental. So that's where it becomes difficult for us to inventory the rental stock, because what an individual strata property owner does with their apartment, whether it's theirs or they're renting it out, it's hard for us to gather that information. It's a really difficult category of housing to inventory.
All right. We're satisfied. Thank you, Heather. I'll call on Ryan Perry to our 6.2 official community plan update. Welcome, Ryan.
Great, thank you. So my name is Ryan Perry. I know a few of you, but great to be here to chat with you about the official community plan update. We would love to take a few minutes of your time to introduce the update process, highlight some of the work we've been doing behind the scenes on our background research report, including the engagement plan that we're now working into for May, and touch on next steps and how we'd like to involve the committee going forward. We don't have any big questions for you today, but today is really about trying to raise awareness of the process. Hopefully that will get out to your own networks, and you can help encourage people to get out in May to have a deeper conversation about specific ideas, issues, et cetera, as we get out to the community. So I will give a little bit of background about why we're doing the OCP update and what that process looks like, why the branding of the project and how that relates to the previous process. Then I'll walk you through the components of the background research report. We don't have time to go through all the details, but just so you have a sense of what's in there that you may want to check out later, and then summarize with recent and next steps. So we're updating the OCP for a number of reasons. We know Abbotsford is a rapidly growing community with significant population growth in the last census period, and that continues, and you hear a lot about that in the media. It doesn't seem to be slowing down. Official community plans are typically updated every 5 to 10 years. While it doesn't seem like it's been that long ago, the 2016 update is now 8 years ago. It has been identified as a strategic plan priority by council to update our OCP. A lot of work has also been done since that 2016 OCP to update city master plans and strategies. And we've learned a fair bit from those master plans and strategies. So we want to make sure the OCP is responding to those plans, but also to the current context and issues. We want to be able to build on the existing plan, but address any gaps and shortfalls and respond to provincial legislation changes, which are significant. The city had been talking about updating the OCP prior to the recent provincial legislation changes, but the timing is really good because we need to respond to the small scale multi-unit housing requirements. We have requirements for transit oriented areas. We have requirements for updating our housing needs report. And we want to make sure the OCP and zoning bylaws are aligned as needed to respond to each of those things. So in terms of aligning with provincial timelines, we're working with some hard deadlines for this OCP update. We have to be finished this OCP update legislatively by the end of 2025. And that will start a new cycle based on legislation that requires we update our housing needs report every 5 years. And if that housing needs report identifies gaps in our OCP, we then need to update and review the OCP to make sure that it's accommodating and providing the opportunity for the residential needs of our community. So this is, we are now on a potentially a 5-year OCP update cycle, which would then require us to also think about our master plans in coordination with that. This OCP update is, as you can probably guess, we're going to be looking at preparing new and updated OCP policy, updating the development permit guidelines, any OCP maps, and very likely making zoning bylaw recommendations or even some strategic updates to the zoning bylaw that would come forward with it. We presented this slide to council and the community on January 30th when we brought forward the background research report, just as a reminder of the important role that the OCP plays within the city. It sets that overarching vision for the future of Abbotsford. It identifies the big ideas that the city is working to achieve, or the big moves. It outlines the desired distribution of existing and future land uses and sets expectations for amenities, public realm, and urban design with new development. But the OCP doesn't work on its own. It is influenced by legislation from above and strategies and plans that the city has as well. So looking at the relationship to other plans and strategies, we know legislation tells us what must or may be in the official community plan. It also now emphasizes what that timing is for revisiting the plan and having a housing needs report and what must be in that housing needs report. We also have to coordinate with the Fraser Valley Regional Growth Strategy, and the legislation identifies what the required engagement minimums are, which we often exceed those to make sure we're engaging all those that need to be engaged. Importantly, the OCP and strategic plan need to be talking to each other and closely coordinated. And then more detailed master plans and strategies help implement the big ideas of the OCP, and what we learn through those master plans and strategies then feeds back into the OCP. So it's a bit cyclical, and I'll show a graphic on that in a moment. But ultimately, the vision and policy of the official community plan gets implemented as new development proceeds and as financial planning, capital projects, and service delivery hit the ground on a year-over-year basis. So an example we've talked about before about this relationship. Let's take the urban forest as an example. There is policy in the OCP that talks about the value of the urban forest and sets the idea of establishing a tree canopy target. Then the master plan, while dealing with many other things, would also speak to what are some of the actions we need to take specifically to achieve that OCP vision. That then leads to more detailed work in an urban forest strategy, which starts to get into what those tree canopy targets should be and what additional bylaws might need to be changed. That takes us into stage 4 or step 4, where the rubber hits the road with bylaw changes, tree protection bylaw, adjustments to our development bylaw, all of which work towards that larger OCP vision. So it helps us to remind ourselves of this relationship so that we don't try and get too detailed and figure out all of the challenges in step 1 in the OCP, but we learn and it cycles through and informs the OCP as we do these other more detailed pieces of work. The OCP update process is going to follow the city's familiar 4-stage process, where we do background research, explore new directions, prepare new policy, and then ultimately adopt the plan. We have completed background research stage 1, which was really helping us understand what has changed since 2016 when the plan was last updated. Population plans, legislation, a lot has changed since 2016. Helps us evaluate how we're making progress on the current OCP, where we might be able to make some improvements. And it identifies some key challenges and early ideas for discussion so we can hit the ground running with the community in stage 2. And that's where we are now. We're preparing to go out to the community to validate and understand what some of the key issues and opportunities are, undertake engagement that's framed by that research, is linked to all those legislation changes, but is supported by some early ideas for speaking to the community. And ultimately, we're working towards, in this stage, trying to identify what are those big moves or those new directions that we think we can dive deeper into that will help improve the OCP. That would then take us to actually drafting the policy and preparing draft policy, so getting into the details in stage 3. We would then take the draft OCP changes to the community as well, refine the OCP changes, and then present those through the more formal part of the process at the end, which is finalizing and presenting the changes as a bylaw to council for consideration. Now, the branding and name recognition of the project is often important to help people recognize the project and try and understand, okay, yeah, I've seen this, I know what's happening with this, I remember this from a few months ago. The city did a really good job with this in 2016 with the Abbotsford branding. Some of you may remember it, but it was quite memorable. Tagline was "Shape Your City." It was quite successful. In fact, it won a few awards for the work that it had done, or it has won an award for the work it has done. But we thought with this update, let's build on that brand recognition. We know 2016 was a big turning point for the city, so we've carried forward that Abbotsford, but added the 2050, recognizing we're looking to the next 25 years, which is a common OCP growth horizon. It's also the time horizon of the Fraser Valley Future Regional Growth Strategy. So there's some good alignment there while building on the successes of the existing plan. The last section here I'll chat about is the background research report. It's organized in a way that is intended as a bit of a one-stop shop. So we recognize there's a wide range of audiences we're trying to help inform or set a baseline for. Everything from council and committees like yourselves to residents, businesses, special interest organizations, and staff, really to understand what is the baseline that we're starting this conversation from for updating the OCP. Chapter 1 provides a high-level introduction of the project, touching on what is an OCP, why we're updating it, why residents should care about this process, and identifying what we're trying to achieve through the process. Chapter 2 is really interesting. It looks at what's changed since the last OCP update, looking at census data and other data sources to really understand from 2016 to today who we are, such as population, age, immigration, household size and incomes. How has that changed in the last census period? It also talks about where we live, touching on housing costs, breakdown of dwelling types, age of housing, all things that are going to be really important as we think about policy changes. Looks at residential vacancy rates. We are trending in the right direction, but we're not quite there yet for residential vacancy. And it looks at things such as changes to rent costs by unit size since 2016. So among other topics, these things really help us understand today's context when we're thinking about land use updates. We then get into chapter 3 that's really taking a close look at how well has the city been doing and the community been doing in moving forward with the big ideas and goals of the official community plan. The chapter starts with an overall look at our urban structure to look at how that's working, and is growth going where the city envisioned it going through the official community plan. And the story is yes, urban core and existing neighborhoods, we're seeing it exceeding the growth that we were trying to target in those areas. I think new neighborhoods will catch up now that the McKee plan has been adopted, but the news is good on that, and it seems to be working. It also seems to be delivering the type of housing that the city is looking for in order to start to shift the type of development we're getting. We're seeing a lot of new apartment development, townhouse development, and a decrease in single detached dwelling as a proportion of new applications. We also look carefully at the big ideas or the big moves that the city shapes its policy beneath. The existing city plans and strategies are important so we understand what are the details of all of the other more detailed things the city is doing to support those big ideas. It's more of a reference chapter. We also have a chapter in here about local Indigenous populations and our neighbors in the context of senior government steps related to UNDRIP and DRIPA, which is important context. We do spend some time talking about what our research suggests are some of the key changes, challenges, and opportunities for the city. Of course, we're going to build on this by talking to the community further, but we really clearly see that housing and climate change are two of those big challenges that we face, not just locally, but more broadly. It includes a summary of the recent provincial changes to legislation. So if you want to understand all those moving parts that are happening around housing and legislation changes, I recommend checking out this chapter. We've tried to put it in pretty straightforward terms. There's a lot of layers to it, but a one-stop shop for trying to understand that in the Abbotsford context. And with regards to climate change, the chapter touches on some of the challenges and responses of various levels of government, global, national, provincial, and locally here. One of the most important parts of the background research report is the engagement strategy. This outlines who we're going to be speaking to and how we're going to be engaging the various groups. And I'll touch on that with this group in a few moments. But Council did endorse this strategy, and so this is our roadmap for how we're going to engage the community going forward. The last chapter talks about it's about jumpstarting dialogue. It's important for us to hit the ground running when we go out in May. We know we have to be finished by the end of 2025, and it allows us to reflect on some of the existing policy, senior government initiatives or changes, and look at the big picture, some of the bold steps we can be taking to increase housing supply and some strategic policy updates. So this section, as an example, presents an early idea of allowing townhomes and arterials. It provides some rationale as to why we think we should be looking at that. And then it talks about how it's related to our federal funding application under the Housing Accelerator Fund. This chapter also allows us to look at how certain topics will need to be addressed through the OCP under our Housing Accelerator Fund approvals and also the legislation, looking at those that we need to align with as part of this process that are going ahead of the work we're doing in the OCP, but then some of the bigger issues that we need to address or actions we need to explore through the OCP itself. The chapter talks about next steps, which is essentially this, that we brought this report to Council on January 30th. Council endorsed the engagement strategy and asked staff to move into stage 2. Launched the Let's Talks page for this project, so you can go there, get all the information about the project, about what's been done so far and what's coming up. We've been and are now preparing for engagement and outreach. In May, we have a number of events at various locations around the city, typical or similar to open house style events, where we're going to be presenting some of this background and some of the early ideas and really starting to understand what community perspectives are on the issues, but also some of the opportunities the city has to improve the OCP. One of those events is a World Cafe that we're hosting with special interest organizations. So this is ADBA, Chamber of Commerce, a number of organizations like that, but we'd love to have a couple of committee members, if they're interested, join us at the World Cafe as well. And we'll be asking for a couple of representatives from each of the committees to be part of that discussion. So I don't need any answers now, but I'll be touching base with the chair as we get closer to that with the details of the event. And hopefully we have some of you that would be interested in joining us. Once we have that engagement complete in May, we'll be preparing new directions, so those big moves, and presenting those recommendations to council as a stage 2 new directions report, which would essentially allow us to say, okay, great, we know the big directions that we now need to dig into further and actually prepare policy for. So sorry I threw a lot at you there, but really encourage you to go to the Let's Talk Abbotsford page, letstalkabbotsford.ca/OCP. There's a button there. You can subscribe to get updates anytime we have a milestone in the project or events coming up, and we're going to have quite a few in May. You'll be notified by email. And it's a great way to stay in touch with the project team. And of course, we'll be back to update the committee as we move forward. So thank you very much for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Ryan. John, floor is open.
Can I be the John on this one and ask a litany of different things? The outreach is done through the in-person events, through the consultations with organizations, and the Let's Talk Abbotsford. Those are the 3 specific mechanisms, basically. The public outreach, or the shops, or the pop-ups and the events.
For the general public, yeah, it would be the open house events, Let's Talk online, but then we've got direct relationships and communication with different organizations. Depends on the topic that's being talked about.
So is all the feedback that's going to be collected from Let's Talk Abbotsford as a result of the page that's just been launched, that's the universe of content that's going to be submitted for the OCP? I guess I'm just wondering, is it in background research that any other feedback or in community dialogue has been engaged in kind of how it's shaped?
Yeah, great question.
I just feel like let's talk, people are directed to it, right? And a lot of what members will tell us is that, well, we've communicated this time and time again, so every time there's another, whether it's the culture plan or the community plan or the this and the, so I'm just, sorry.
Great question, yeah. So the open house events, all of the feedback we receive through those will be reported back to council through that stage 2 report. That would be in combination with anything online, any meetings, or for example, the World Cafe Workshop, we would be reporting that back as well. We'll often get emails or direct contact with key issues, and we would be doing our best to capture those key concerns and questions and make sure that's being reported back to council as we've heard them through the process. We also have a technical advisory group internal to the city, and that's where we get the opportunity to connect with our parks, rec, and culture teams, our engineering teams, where they've heard through their own channels a number of different issues.
So relying
that
on
they
the
can bring to
staff rather
table.
than the direct input, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly would love to hear it directly, but we're not going to discount the knowledge of the team that's been hearing things through other events. So that
I think culture is happy with Tara speaking on behalf of our engagement. I wonder if when we were the Citizens Advisory Commission last in 2013 to 16, there's a lot of discussion about kind of the failures of the previous plan. I don't know if I don't know, Mark, if there's like the change from what we accomplished 10 years ago to now, what shortcomings there were, what kind of evaluations, if any, I mean, that came out of that, just as somebody who was involved, I'm just interested.
Yes.
How the focus has changed. I noticed there's no Citizens Advisory Commission here, so I imagine that's one piece, right?
Yeah,
Sure.
Sure, yeah, as Aaron, you were on the Citizen Advisory Committee in 2016, so you're aware of that process. We knew when we started in 2014, that the OCP update was a significant update. It was essentially a rewrite of the OCP. And we knew that going into it, and that was the scope of the work, and hence the reason for the, in part, the advisory committee being set up. This case, we felt that this is more building on the success of the current plan, and the progress report that's in the background research report, it kind of showed that the plan is achieving what it set out to achieve. It's not saying it's perfect, and that's why we're doing an update. But this one is more of it's more than a tweak, but it's an update building on the current plan and affirming what's working within the current plan. So it's a slightly different scope of work, I think, this time around than in versus the 2016 process.
So last time it was building to 200, yeah?
Yes.
Now we're just looking for the timeline of 50 years? We don't have like a quantitative metric that we're looking at, or?
Yeah, so we do look at BC Stats projections on by 2050, where will we be? And we will have, according to BC Stats projections, which are only estimates, we will have surpassed 250,000 people by the time 250,000 people by the time we hit 2050. Wow. Growth has been faster than was originally anticipated under the median growth scenario of the past OCP. So we have been growing quicker than anticipated.
And is Chilliwack 150 in that world?
I know they're growing quickly as well. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I do know Abbotsford in the projections was actually definitely in the top for Fraser Valley.
John?
Yeah, just to follow up on Aaron, again, going back like 20 years, in the last couple of OCPs that I've been engaged with, I remember, the previous iteration before 2016, it was sort of an aspirational OCP, and the problem then was implementation. They had wonderful ideas, but it was difficult to implement them because we didn't build that into the process. And this last one, I think the city did a much better job of implementing and measuring what we're achieving, right? And so, I think this one just continue that process, right? It works, and I could see a huge change, a positive change in the way the city develops compared to like 15 or 20 years ago. So you're doing good work.
I would say, just to build on that, John, you're right, the 2005 OCP was very aspirational.
It was,
And that aspiration created a lot of uncertainty.
It did.
And it really didn't have a North Star, whereas I think in 2016, we really focused on that.
Mm-hmm.
can build a plan around the big ideas, and it's a lot of good urban structure, a city of centers.
Yeah.
And we built on that. And as you see in the background research report, the progress report that Ryan's team worked on, really sort of show that that plan is being implemented, that vision is being
Yes.
implemented through development now.
Yeah, and if I could comment on that, as a counselor, the difference is dramatic, because in the 05 OCP, when applications came to council for development, it was, well, should we or shouldn't we? Perhaps we will, perhaps we won't support that developer. We had split councils would say, no, I'm opposed to it. Another one said, I'm in favor for these reasons. And we debated around the table. We had no strong legal reason to deny or to approve. Whereas this OCP, the one we're under now, it's zoned for that. And basically, we're bound legally. Yeah, we've said in the OCP, you may build this here, as long as you stay within the guidelines. And so it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So it's light.
Yeah, I don't see a radical change in direction with this, do you?
Implementing the provincial changes in a way that
Well,
aligns
that's
with the
gonna
plan
affect,
is
of course,
something
yeah.
that is
That's
going to
kind
be
of,
complicated.
okay, fair enough.
Yeah, Matthew.
Yeah, doing a massive job and quite good timing. I bumped into the old age-friendly strategy, and I was just wondering if any of those ideas are being added. Like there was sort of a note way back then that a lot of the areas with more seniors, like Trafalgar or Clearbrook, there's not very good connections to really anything, and you know there's the telephone poles right on Clearbrook, so it's things like that are those sort of age-specific things being incorporated?
Yeah, that's part of the background research chapter on existing plans and strategies, is we need to be looking at what have we developed either since. I can't recall the age-friendly strategy date.
It's really small, but
Yeah.
Do you recall the date on it or the general time frame? Was it pre-2016?
Pre-2010, it was, I think,
okay.
pre-2010, I was involved in that, yeah.
The reason I ask is it's very likely that a lot of the directions of that strategy would have ended up in the OCP, and that's something we certainly can look at, is to see how have those ideas already embedded themselves, and is there anything missing? Our transportation and transit master plan is another place where that walkability is also being considered.
because the thing with that I had with the transportation master plan is it's sort of like all covered, like say active transport, it's like nonstop, everything is sort of like, oh, this will be a good idea to have like a route here, and there wasn't like a specific like actual route. Like the only thing worse than having no bike lanes is having a bike lane here and a bike lane
Yeah,
there.
fragmented.
Yeah. And so I think having like at least another route sort of north of say South Fraser Way, north of George Ferguson or something like that.
But not Downs.
Yeah, 'cause, or ones that are at least connecting elementary schools to the family parent high schools, so that kids that are going to the elementary school can sort of bike or walk to their high schools. Yeah, and then just with that, the overlapping the Indigenous piece with the that transportation master plan. That like the UNDRIP is great. It's almost like some more practical things. Both the Sumac and the Mathawee First Nations don't have bus stops, so they're not connected. The Indigenous community has, especially on reserve, has way lower driver's license rates than the rest of Abbotsford. So I know that's not as flashy as saying yes, we support UNDRIP, but it's sort of something practical.
Yeah, and our engagement with local First Nations was something that happened at the very beginning, before the engagement strategy was brought to council. We did meet with each of the local First Nations, including people of the referral office, to understand how they wanted to be engaged. So that's going to continue, and we're adapting to the needs as each stage goes forward. So appreciate that feedback.
Good points. Others? So think about Ryan's invitation for some committee members to join the World Cafe. Let me or let our staff know. Probably
we'll be reaching out.
Oh, you will, okay,
Yeah,
good.
We'll be reaching out to the committee through by email, I suppose, Ryan,
Yes.
seeking volunteers.
All right, that's good. All right then, thanks,
Great.
Ryan.
Thank you very much for your
Look
time.
forward to the next time we see you here.
You'll continue the dialogue, yeah.
Yeah. All right, that brings us to 8.3 disc golf course updates from Todd and Danielle. The most exciting item on the agenda today.
And most concise.
And most concise.
And most concise, yes.
All right.
So thanks very much, everyone. Disc golf course update. The purpose, really in a nutshell, is to kind of preemptively answer the question for the committee. Well, what happened to that topic when Jonathan Schneider came? So for those that weren't here, Jonathan Schneider, an advocate for disc golf, came at the last meeting, talked about the concept of a disc golf course. He was specific about Claiborne Park. All the points you see there as benefits, we as staff fully agree with. We said that at the time verbally in the meeting. Mr. Sunder did a great job of kind of compiling his submission. So we wanted to support that. About a month later, we met, and we as Danielle Pope, our Director of PRC Planning and Business Services, myself, with Mr. Snyder at Claiborne Park. We walked the site, got our shoes a little muddy there, but we took a look at kind of the advantages of that site in terms of a disc golf participant. So Mr. Snyder has a great background, has some understanding of course design, identified kind of those 5 key areas of advantage there. To me, the hydrology piece was interesting. In some areas of that site are a little bit wet. He actually identified that as a great opportunity for water hazards, no different than kind of traditional golf, so to speak. So you can see the layout that he proposed. That was part of his package at the February 8th meeting. We walked a portion of that site, took a look at the entrance and exit points. Had a good discussion about some considerations in terms of clearing, what that would do to kind of natural systems in there, geotechnical, archaeological. Kind of put some of our thoughts as kind of parks planning, the lens on it, which Mr. Snyder was very open to, very positive about. He's got some volunteers that he has worked with, and they have professional designations or associated services. We said we're happy to engage, as we've told other community groups. We have a bit of a process for that, just so it's open and transparent, and other people have an awareness on that, which he was perfectly fine with. We also reminded him, as we said at the committee meeting, that this is a good topic to bring into the sport field and sport court strategy process. We reminded him of Claiborne Park and that going through a master plan process in 2027. He obviously has Claiborne Park as a high priority. He acknowledged he lives close by, so proximity is advantageous for him. We also noted other advantages of the site, things like parking, access points, but we also said, let's not limit it to Claiborne Park. There may be other sites in the community that are even more advantageous for a variety of reasons. And we explained that sport field and sport court strategy will help set us up for the next 20 years when it comes to sport participation in parks and what sort of facilities and amenities we build. So he's been invited to that process, seemed quite understanding, was actually quite encouraged about being part of that process and actually being recognized as a sport. So for those that don't know, in some communities, if disc golf is not necessarily viewed as a sport, but more of kind of a casual pastime or pursuit. But it definitely is a sport, has rules, has standards, has associations associated with it. And we think there's a good opportunity there. So we'll let that play out through the sport court strategy.
Great. Any comments, questions?
I don't think that was the shortest.
Heather, were you timing
Concise.
So 2027, they'll engage with the plan, and that's the outcome, basically.
So, well, the outcome is actually go through the sport field sport court strategy. Doesn't mean that it can't be brought forward through the Claiborne Park Master Plan, but the sport field and sport court strategy is starting this year. In fact, we've already been engaging the sports community on that. So we kind of encouraged him that, Mr. Snyder, your outcome is probably a little bit more expeditious going through the sport field sport court plan, but we're not saying your outcome's at Claiborne Park, right?
Did he say he wanted it? Were there plans for something in Mill Lake in the redesign, like one of the options, or no? That had nothing to do with it.
So yeah, we acknowledged that when he came, he brought Mill Lake Park forward. We did put that forward in the draft proposal for the Mill Lake Park Master Plan. We're working on kind of the final proposal on that. We acknowledge as staff that's a kind of an introductory course at best. If you know golf, think of like a nine hole kind of par 3 course. It's pretty basic in Mill Lake Park, but again, it's an introduction to the sport for people that may not be familiar with it.
Great. Any other comments, questions? All right, hearing none. Thanks, Todd. That was well done. Again, that's 3 for 3. Thanks, staff. That brings us to 6.4, exploring option workshops. Workshop, singular. Sorry, Tara Dickinson.
You're on. Maybe I'll just do the brief introduction for those that haven't met her or don't recall. This is Tara Dickinson. She is our cultural services manager. Leads our team on that and the implementation of the Culture Connect strategy. We've got a workshop format today, so just to kind of set the stage for that as opposed to other topics such as tree bylaw, which the committee's seen recently a couple of meetings where staff have done background research. They've formed some thoughts in terms of direction. They're bringing it to the committee to vet those thoughts and then bring it a second time for recommendations. This workshop, we don't necessarily have the same level of detail thought for it. So we've done the key findings, the background research. That was the document that was circulated. What Tara would like to do today is walk the committee through a bit of an exercise to really gather your input on that, on the topic of public art, and see if we can kind of layer that into the entire feedback from the stage 2 piece. So, Tara.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. Excited to be here. I know some of you have actually participated in this workshop already, but very excited to be here talking about one of my favorite topics, public art. So I will try to keep my speaking brief, but then I'm hoping your part of the workshop will not be brief, and we'll have some interesting and fulsome conversations. So what I'm going to quickly do is just run through that presentation that was sent out with the agenda. I won't spend too much time on this just because I know everybody received that in advance, but I do want to highlight some of the main key findings and takeaways because this package of information really helps set the groundwork for some of the questions and directions that we're going to be pursuing through that Exploring Options conversation. So just to introduce the project, so we began working on the development of the new public art policy program and a maintenance plan, this project, early on in 2023. And we started with 5 months of community consultation and research. So just go through that primary research, so speaking directly with arts and culture stakeholders and heritage stakeholders and the community. And then the secondary research, which included a very thorough analysis of existing city policies, processes, and plans, and then also a municipal comparative review to identify successful and innovative practices in public art management from other municipalities across Canada. So again, the research included analysis pretty in-depth of existing city policies. And for that, what we're calling that primary research, that community consultation. So this took place again over 5 months. We had over 400 participants, and these sessions were held in person, one-on-one conversations, group workshops, online surveys. We also spent a lot of time with our local First Nations to make sure that we gathered their unique perspectives, as public art is also talking about representation on the land. Visual representation on the land. So the following slides I'm going to quickly run through again because everybody did receive this in advance, but I just want to highlight some of the key level findings from that consultation and then also that research. And you'll see some of these ideas come up in the direction and the probing questions I will ask for the exploring options phase of the conversation. So through the community consultation, we asked a series of questions of both in the stakeholder meetings and in the online surveys. So just as I introduce these topics and these questions, you'll see me use a term called Abbotsford's visual landscape. And it's worth noting here that we're not just talking about City of Abbotsford public art. We're talking about all the statues, murals, unique seating pieces, sculptures out in the community. Because when we're receiving feedback on public art, it's not just on city projects. It could also be people responding to their thoughts on the murals in the historic downtown core or the art benches down there. So you'll hear me use the term Abbotsford's visual landscape, and that's just a wide umbrella term used to describe all of that content. So this first question really looked at how satisfied were these arts and culture stakeholders and the public that Abbotsford is a place that values visual cultural expression. And here we had 18% of the stakeholders and 34% of the general public saying that they were satisfied. This next question was looking specifically at how well did the arts and culture stakeholders feel that Abbotsford's visual landscape, so again, everything that you see out there in that visual public realm, tells the stories and the histories of Abbotsford's Indigenous First Nations and peoples. And here there was 12% and the majority of survey respondents saying that they felt that these stories could be shared more effectively through public art. We also wanted to gauge how well the arts and culture sector and the public felt that Abbotsford's visual landscape reflects the diversity of the community now. And here we had 58% of the public and 41% of the stakeholders saying that they were somewhat satisfied that Abbotsford's visual landscape reflects the diversity of the community. So this next question digs a little bit deeper into that response. And of course, the feedback on this question depends on who is answering the survey. But we wanted to gauge how well people felt that Abbotsford's visual landscape reflected their own unique culture. And here we had 35% of the stakeholders and 32% of the public saying that they felt that Abbotsford's visual landscape, again, all of the art, murals, statues that are out in the public realm, reflects their own culture. So through the engagement process, we also asked participants to identify what they felt were the most important themes, topics, or ideas that should be expressed through a public art program. So we had really three main coalescing themes around the main topics. 38% of participants felt that Abbotsford's nature and landscape should be celebrated through public art. It was 34% felt that history, both from the community's Indigenous roots to more recent immigration patterns, is a topic to explore through public art. And then also a very strong theme of diversity and multiculturalism, making sure that that is shown through public art. So overall, from the primary research, that consultation with the public and with the arts and culture sector, we had some really main takeaways. The biggest being that there is a really keen interest to participate more in public art processes, and also some interest in exploring how we define public art. So perhaps moving away from some of the traditional concepts of public art of being just sculptures or paintings. We also heard that there is definitely an opportunity to increase more diversity and inclusion through public art, and that there's also an opportunity to examine existing city bylaws or processes that may create barriers at times for inclusive participation. So I think this quote at the bottom here is a great snapshot, a great takeaway of the overall theme from that consultation, really focusing on diversity, reconciliation, and multiculturalism. Okay, so that are the key findings from that community consultation phase of the research, but then we also did extensive research into municipal comparative review and an analysis of the existing city policies and bylaws and processes around public art. So we took all of that information and we analyzed it within what we're calling the 8 main components of a public art program and plan. So these are those necessary functionalities and processes that need to be in place for the effective management and delivery of a municipal public art program. And what I'll do is I'll just quickly run through some of the key findings from this phase of the research. So in terms of the overall policy framework, gaps in the existing policy were identified that really, we heard, made implementation challenging both for community and for staff. And also within the existing policy, similar to what we heard from the community, we identified an opportunity to really strengthen the definition of what is or is not considered public art. In terms of the governance and management, one of the key takeaways was an opportunity to include key performance indicators or standardized metrics so we can measure the success and the impact of the public art program. So really, are we reaching the goals that we want to reach through this program? Are we impacting the community in the ways that we're hoping and bringing about those engagements that we're hoping to have? And this research also echoed the comments on diversity and inclusion as an opportunity to increase that through the public art program. In terms of the funding mechanisms and source, one of the main takeaways was the limitations around not being able to pool public art resources for projects that could have the greatest positive benefit for the community. And of course, we also found very strong connections with the existing city policies through the 2016 official community plan, and a great opportunity with the current official community plan work that's happening through the Parks, Recreation and Culture Master Plan, and of course through the Culture Connect strategy, which was the impetus for this work. So the municipal comparison, this is a lot of information on here on this slide, but essentially it also helped us map out where Abbotsford is in its public art development compared to other municipalities. So this is still a relatively young field of practice in Canada. This work started around the 1950s, and Abbotsford, there we go. We are around a level 3. So we are at the beginning of an art in public places phase in terms of municipal public art. And this is a really great thing because it means there's a lot of opportunities to really be strategic with a public art program and policy. And ultimately, the biggest takeaway is that this project presents us with the opportunity, again, to be very strategic with the development of the policy of the program plan so that we can help support the strategic plan mandate to be the cultural hub of the Fraser Valley. Okay, this was the most talking that I'm going to do for this section. So that was a very quick recap.
Maybe just before we jump into the next section, just to acknowledge that Dan had emailed us previously that she has another commitment that she has to depart for.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not that she's not interested in this topic, Tara. I just didn't get a chance to tell you that.
Thank you.
Actually, I'm very interested because I love the cultural aspect.
Okay.
Being of Dutch heritage, when I moved here, I mean, every farmer in Matsqui and Sumas was Dutch. And you wouldn't know that. We're going to see an extra tulip or wooden shoe somewhere.
I love it. See, I love when we get together to talk about public art. Okay, so just in terms of where we are in the process before we move on to the best part of this discussion, which is where everybody else around the table gets to share their ideas. So we started this project back in May of 2023, and again, we had that 5 months of quite in-depth community consultation and research. This is our final Exploring Options workshop. We've had many other workshops with the public and with the arts, heritage, and cultural sector as well. And then we're moving very quickly into the stage 3 of developing those draft policy and program plan considerations, which again, we'll get further consultation on. And we are hoping to have the entire policy and program plan complete for the end of 2024 so we can start implementation. So it's a nice brisk pace on this one. Okay, so now I'm going to do something that maybe isn't asked very often. I'm going to ask you to break out your phones, to not put them away. So the next slides are going to be an interactive workshop where we have a few high-level questions around public art and around some approaches that we're proposing for public art in terms of guiding this conversation. So we're not getting into the specifics with this workshop because again, this is the high-level exploring options, but you'll see some of those ideas that I shared in the key findings. We will seek your impact and your response to those, and we're also going to build off of some of that information that was shared in the key findings. So we are going to be using an app called menti.com. And what you can do is there's a QR code, or you can just go to menti.com and you can enter in the code. What this app does, if everyone's signing up for it before I've told you what it does, I love this. What this app does is it allows participants to add in their comments anonymously, and they'll pop up on the screen for everyone to see. But Some folks prefer to verbalize their comments, so I've also got a notepad here. So it's really about which option you would like to use and or both, because sometimes the conversations just start rolling as well too.
Because I don't want to skew the conversation.
More about the menu then.
Yeah, more about the
I might throw in my 2 cents, so I'm just not gonna manipulate the answers.
Has everyone had a chance to log in that wants to log in? Yeah, okay. And again, I'll also be taking notes here, so either option works. Okay, and you can see here my tests to make sure the system is working, which is actually a very good example of how your comments will show up. So this first question is really getting a pulse check from you on how those key findings have landed with you. So is there anything that you found unexpected or surprising, both from that consultation or the research findings that we shared? Or do you agree wholeheartedly with everything that was shared in that report?
Do we just, is there a, we just type in what we want?
Yeah, just type in and then you can submit. Katie, can you just tell me, is that saying show responses? There we go, perfect.
What's the thumbs up button for?
It's just like a,
No, but I know, but I
That's-
mean,
yeah,
can we just hit that to agree?
you can just hit it, yeah,
Oh, got it,
yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
The findings align with what I see too. And I'm unsurprised at the low scores.
I do think, oh, but not.
Yeah. Some were higher. Some were higher.
Yeah, but in the negative form.
No, but there were some people at like 59% somewhat satisfied.
Yeah, that to me is a no.
You're asking only one aspect of culture. I mean, just people's,
So what I
what culture.
What I will ask too is this form of dialogue is really great because it gives everyone an opportunity to share their thoughts, but also we can have a little bit of a conversation around this too. So is there anything, and that's good, is there anything that anybody wanted to expand on any of the comments up on the screen there, or anything that they want to respond to?
I'd say one thing. I think just the way diversity sort of mashes in a bunch of sort of more contextualized issues. Like I think the Indigenous component is one part. I think welcoming newcomers and making, we really do have a West Abbotsford, East Abbotsford thing that just happened. And so making newcomers feel welcome, but also sort of honoring the folks that did the dikes and that poured their blood, sweat, and tears into making farmland. So I think if you just sort of put it all into diversity, that you sort of miss those those contextualized parts.
Yeah, absolutely, thank you for that. Yeah, that word bubble pulls words from comments that may have been much longer and had much more nuance, but always remembering that there's all those different histories and stories behind that word.
I think too that it's a tough question because I think folks will have a difficult time separating culture and art culture. There's lots of aspects to culture, and this is one piece of it. And when you ask that question, I'm not sure that they will answer it by separating just that part of it.
Absolutely.
Is this specifically arts and culture? Is it recreation cultures? For like, what is the goal to be asking people about? Is it all the above?
I think it's about whatever they
Okay.
bring forward is the conversation. So that's why these open-ended questions are so helpful sometimes, because we get to see what is that, what are everyone's thoughts and opinions, and what's in that kind of that scope of how everyone is defining that. Okay, has everyone had a chance to respond to this question? Okay, we'll go on to the next one. Okay, this is a very open-ended question, but if you have any brainstorm any thoughts or ideas that come to mind for you from your work, from your experiences for a new policy and program plan.
Can everybody answer the question? 'Cause I can, oh.
Good to see you. Thank you.
There's an exit.
Get one shot at this.
No, you can submit multiple answers.
No, I mean.
Yeah.
It isn't letting me submit anything else.
Oh, can you go back?
No? Oh, maybe refresh?
Yep, pull down
Yeah.
on the screen.
So there's no limit. There is a word limit for each little box that you submit, but you could submit multiple boxes of answers.
Everybody will see your spelling mistakes, so.
But no one will know if it's you.
Yes, they will.
It's an interesting format, I like it.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many times ideas just float through and they disappear. Like just an informal discussion.
Helps visual learners too, John, like people that maybe are
Yes.
auditory, they're visual.
And
Yeah,
then
great talk.
allows everybody equal speaking time, so to speak.
That's
Yeah.
true too.
course, when you're facilitating this, you hope everyone's still typing and not just doing something else on their phones. But I think we still have some answers being added.
Anybody want to know any scores? Oh, sorry.
Too early.
Did I say that?
For that? Master Sutton. Oh.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah, it has.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
Is there,
Live all day.
is there anything on here that folks would like to speak more to, if you're comfortable? Perhaps what a constellation model means, or?
Yeah. I was interested in that.
That would be me. So what does it mean?
Do you mind, Christina?
Just a second, just gonna see. Oh, it doesn't let me submit the mic.
Yeah, I tried to do it again too, and it didn't work again.
Yeah, it doesn't, it gives you
You've already done it.
there, I'm going to come up now. So constellation model. Constellation model was something that we put into our strategic plan at Heritage Abbotsford for, in terms of the culture in general. Sometimes it feels like, or not now, but in the past, and you probably know what I'm talking about when I said it feels like sometimes things come from the top down, and we're kind of told that what it is that's good for us and what we want to see.
Heavens no.
Yeah, heavens no. And so a constellation model is something that's used a lot for private businesses, but it's been used, for example, the city of Edmonton implemented it for their arts and culture. And so it's more like a round table thing where you have a committee, but you know, like when you have a committee like this, you have a specific person that has to, or organization that has to facilitate the round table, and then, you know, you've got a chair, and then it's not an open discussion anymore, because it's like, you are here because the city told you to be here today at this time, and they're running this meeting. Whereas with the constellation model, everybody's on an equal footing. So for example, if we're talking about culture as a whole, it would be the kind of thing where, let's say you had questions about something, you want to develop something to do with art and heritage, where the two have to come together. Then you could speak to the people that are at the table, representatives from all kinds of groups that work with heritage, to say, well, who here works with heritage, can we partner up on this? So that it's an even footing, nobody's big brother in the room, right? Which is where Arts Council would have a really good fit, for example, as an organization, because you're the umbrella organization.
So, but is this the kind of thing that we're talking about when Tara sets up the, the community
Yep.
table
Yes.
discussions, basically?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Just
For
reading
sure.
a description of it online, and it sounds perfect. Balancing chaos and order, energy and structure. The governance model supports multi-organization partnerships and networks within complex systems.
That's exactly.
Sounds like
that's-
anarcho-syndicalism to me.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we looked at it
I like
for Heritage Abbotsford specifically, right? Because in the past, and you'll remember this, in the past, we've had a number of similar groups. We've had subcommittees, and Heritage, was it AHOC back in the day, Abbotsford Arts and Heritage Subcommittee. And whereas, you know, you sit in these meetings and nothing, because it's a city-run meeting, we can't say, okay, city, you gotta do this. If you have a constellation model, it's the onus is on us.
But would that see Tara or her staff coming to the table with us at a place where it's not the city staff direct? Is that how that would kind of play out? Is that,
Well,
because
yeah,
we
it's
want to
just-
work.
Exactly, that it's more, we kind of like to be, we'd all like to be in the room without somebody, a big brother organization coming in and saying, no, you can't be here, you don't belong here.
Or at least not setting the agenda that way,
Yes.
so that it's more consensus based in a way.
Right, yes.
Sure.
If we can also save that idea, just for the next topic I'll be presenting on, we're just gonna save that idea.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, it isn't allowing me to
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it
submit a
doesn't.
second one.
Okay, it should, okay.
But I just wanted to raise something that that we've been finding at UFB is a consideration and an issue with public art, especially when you incorporate Indigenous cultural art, which is the care, the caretaking and the maintenance of it.
Yes.
It is culturally significant, to take that into account.
Yes.
And it involves rituals that we did not expect, anticipate, or conceive of. So that's something important to think about when incorporating culture into the visual landscape.
Absolutely.
I was going along the same line with pre-existing public art, that, let's say, and that includes things like markers, and planking systems and things like that, that have not been checked for colonial language and racialized language, which to me brings up a point of, okay, it's one thing if we have something that's publicly owned, like the raspberries or whatever, right? It's a whole nother thing when you say, okay, so now we got to maintain the raspberries because they're publicly owned. That's up to the city to make sure that those are maintained. But what happens when something is privately owned, like the marker that's sitting down across from Samath Elementary with the Louis Sam plaque, for example? It's not great. And so that's privately owned. The organization that put it there doesn't exist anymore. So now who's responsible? Who's responsible for cleaning that language now?
I think that raises a really good point, and Todd's helping me with notes. So all of this we're capturing as well as what's on here, and the scope of this work includes the policy program and the maintenance plan.
Yeah.
But Christine, so absolutely we want to be culturally responsible and fiscally responsible as well too with anything that is, this we're making an investment in. But Christine and I also take your point too, that sometimes there are these pieces that are not necessarily in the city's jurisdiction. But as I mentioned at the beginning, the feedback on the overall visual landscape, people's perceptions can still be influenced by experiences with those other pieces as well too. Yeah.
Aaron?
The one thing I was gonna add personally was, Matt, did you just add one? Cool. I guess it kind of goes in the opposition to what we just talked about, because I'm thinking the suggestion, or just like the thought, is that more accessibility kind of will inherently lead to more diversity, just like as a heuristic to keep in mind going forward. I think when it comes to that culture, which is exactly the opposite, because it's not accessible to have to, for the institution to incorporate these different ways of knowledge and sharing and the future of maintaining those processes. So, but that was just a thought, sorry, I just wanted.
John?
Yeah, not to belabor the maintenance issue, but I think, I see so many public art pieces, particularly downtown Abbotsford. The bench art, I sponsored, I think the last one that was put in was 15 years ago, and that was one that I sponsored. And we've lost a few, and it's unfortunate because it was a wonderful project. And I know it was ADBA, but technically it's now, the pieces are owned by the city. And yeah, it would be nice to see a little bit more attention, definitely, to that end of things, right? And so once you establish a piece of public art, either you go the way that Chilliwack has gone with their mural projects, where every so many years they basically paint right over them and invite new artists. You can do that too, right? But to maintain the energy of public art, I think is important, because just have one-offs all the time, it almost like you're reinventing the whole process rather than just maintaining a level of energy in public art.
Yeah.
And that includes maintenance, of course.
Yeah, it does.
Laura, was your hand up?
It was, but
Okay.
it's gone.
Go ahead, Matthew.
Just with that tournament idea, having like a mural, like a contest, you can actually leverage. So it's not like a for sort of profit artist, but it's more like the recognition is almost the is almost the payoff. So like I know with the X prizes and all those, the actual like R&D and development was like way like I think 10 times more than the actual prize money. And so the amount of effort people are willing to put in to get recognition is not to be sort of undervalued. So I don't know if like the Chilliwack model is the best with but the contest is an interesting way to increase community involvement, and with tournaments you can get the community gaming grants. I don't know if the city can get that, but it is something that is leverageable.
I'll say a lot of artists would look at contests in different ways, in different contexts as exploitative. So that's something that I hear you. The competition, like I run a music awards, right?
Yeah.
So it's under the same kind. So just to be considered. Yeah.
Go ahead. Tara, you want to continue?
I'll continue on to the next. Okay, so we're taking a very big lens on this question. So if we look at public art within the broader civic planning functions, so think about, well, official community planning, neighborhood planning, parks planning, community planning, what are some possibilities, synergies, or challenges that come to mind? I'm just going to walk forward to the screen because there should be a button I can push for multiple responses. I cannot see from this far away. I know, I might take you up on that.
Are we on pace? Are we behind? Like, should we be getting through them a little quicker, or are we okay?
Your two items, the last ones on the agenda.
Okay.
We're good.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
It's wonderful when people have so many thoughtful things to say about public art. Would anybody like to respond to one of the comments on the screen or add to one of the comments?
Aaron?
So I agree, art spaces are hard to come by. I want to push back against the idea that moving outdoors is the answer and reinforce that we need to create more spaces and open more spaces and work with more different users to create more indoor and outdoor spaces.
Yeah.
So I don't completely disagree with that, but I want to caution against yeah.
I agree, that was mine,
Oh,
and
sorry.
I agree that, no, that's okay. You're allowed to disagree with me.
But I'm not disagreeing. I'm just caveating.
But yeah, I agree with you actually, because the balance is important. And it's, it's important to have both because having art outside is an important way of making sure that people understand and get interested in what's going on in the indoor spaces. I think the other thing, I keep coming back to partnership with existing organizations. I know I'm involved with the REACH as well as the university, and the REACH does mural projects every year. And so there's a system of existing knowledge and structure that you can completely leverage because it's already being done and already being done by city sponsored and supported organizations.
I also wouldn't mind responding to the taxes piece, if that's okay, because it is demonstrably, fiscally, mathematically demonstrable that we infuse the economy with public art through tourism, through all sorts of pieces. So I mean, the public may not see it or understand it necessarily, but the value is there, and we can take steps to educate people about it. And I think that's
That's an important, and that's why I said that too, because like we still get to hear about, oh my God, the city spent so much money on those raspberries. Like, come on, get over it already. Like percentage-wise, in terms. So what happens is we go into a pandemic, and then people realize, oh my God, I can't access any of the arts organization, and panic ensues. We go from 28,000 visitors a year to 136 overnight, 136,000 overnight because of the pandemic. Because all of a sudden they realize that this is quality of life issue, there's a dollar amount associated with that.
So you went to more visitors after the pandemic because they wanted to
During the pandemic, and we've stayed there.
Because they want to get the use out of their taxes they pay.
Well, no, I think that they are realizing that this is what they're missing. When they can't go to the REACH and they can't come to Trethewey House, they can't go to Arts Council because we're in lockdown. And then they go, okay, well, that sucked. And who's going to teach me my kids about this now? Your parents that all of a sudden had to teach local history. Where do they go? Well, they end up coming to us, right? And so we took everything, we put it digital, and there's a space there.
Oh, online.
Yeah, well, there's a space there, but it's just like even in person, we skyrocketed. Because I think people realized. And this is what I'm saying, like so they look at the raspberries and they go, oh my God, they spent so much money on that. And then on the other hand, they now don't consider also that, you have to maintain the stuff. And relatively to other communities, we don't pay that much money on our taxes towards art, public art.
Yeah. I think, Christina, that's a great point. And again, we're taking notes so we can capture all this as well. It's that perceived value versus that impact that some of us who work in these fields, you know the economic and social determinants, those benefits of art. But I think that's always a great thing to keep in mind. Were there any other comments or any other thoughts that come to mind before we move on to the next question? Okay, we'll click forward. Okay, so this is actually kind of a nice segue, Christina, from the comments you were just making. So these next few questions are going to tackle a little bit this idea of placemaking. So I'm going to introduce this concept a little bit before we have the questions on this. So we're taking a placemaking approach to this Exploring Options workshop because it really helps address some of those gaps and opportunities that came through in the key findings. Placemaking is something that it's a term that gets used a lot in public art, sometimes in urban planning and cultural planning and design planning. But really placemaking is just about that relationship between a person and their built or natural environment. I like to unpack this concept of placemaking by thinking about if you've gone traveling and you visit a different town or a destination that you were really drawn to. And so there may have been certain features of that location. It could have been pop-up street buskers, it could have been really innovative park spaces or communal outdoor seating areas or interesting benches, or it could have been the murals in public art. And placemaking, all it is the planning that goes behind putting all those pieces in a public space to make it memorable, attractive, enjoyable, a place where people want to be and come back to. So that's how I my way into placemaking is I think about those areas and those destinations that I've been to that really stuck for me and that I would want to go back to, and then think about what made that space so special. But it's a term that some of you may be more familiar with in your work, but everybody has had an experience and an interaction with spaces that they have felt were just more impactful than others. And so the reason why we're exploring this idea of placemaking again in the public art policy is it allows for opportunities to really improve the efficiencies and the communication in administering a public art program. It also allows for a certain level of proactiveness and larger thinking and planning, which were some of those, we've already been discussing that around this table here, but certainly some of the key findings that came out. And then it, more than anything, also allows us to think thoughtfully and strategically about how to support the mandate to be the cultural hub of the Fraser Valley through this placemaking concept. Okay, so this first question is just asking about if you've read, seen, or experienced anything about public art and placemaking that might resonate for us to have it in mind with a new policy or program plan. And again, this can be from your travels, your experiences, something you've experienced, you know, in somewhere else in BC or elsewhere in the world that made that location memorable.
Yeah, all the cafes here are indoors. What's up with that? Do you know how many people you had at Aboriginal Arts and Culture Day last year? I was thinking about that.
Yeah, something.
Hundreds?
Well, yeah, I think we were like 1,400, something like that, I think.
Oh, yeah.
That's the number.
So, okay, around those numbers.
Yeah.
That was you.
We have
comment
two,
there?
yeah, usually, yeah, for an event like that, sometimes we're up into 2,000. There's a couple of other events that we've run in the last couple of years.
I'm just thinking it's not that big a space, but it's
No.
packed for 8 hours. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Exactly, and then when we do that with, like, when we did it over at Carrington House the one time, and we did it as a festival over 2 days, then it still remains the sort of intimate space because there's small clusters. And so even though it's busy, it doesn't feel busy, it doesn't feel like you're, you know, like that because you're in a park. And everything is there.
We had the seating area under the tent, and then there was pavilion, and then there was dancing space.
Yeah.
And I will just say, just to segue off what you're saying, building an event site is a form of placemaking
Yeah,
as well. too.
yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything on here that folks would like to speak more to or respond to?
I think, in terms of this, my comment about the 2,000 people, right? Oftentimes they'll say with art specifically, when you go to a museum or even a heritage house, as it were, people come to see themselves. It's oftentimes, when we put exhibits together, we put them together because of the educational value and this, that, and the other thing. But we can put some aesthetically beautiful things together, and nobody comes to see them because it's not about them. And in Abbotsford, this is absolutely key. You have to remember that in Abbotsford specifically, people come to see themselves. And this is why, when we're putting like the Indigenous exhibit in the basement, for example, in the office, we get Indigenous visitors, we don't get other visitors, right? It's about getting the school kids to come out. The educational component is for the school kids and all of that, but the 3/4 of that exhibit is actually aimed at adults. It's hard to get them to come in and see because the Indigenous folks, they already know about their own history. So that for us in Abbotsford specifically, this is something that stands out.
Thank you. Any other thoughts that come to mind? Anybody wants to build on what they said or build on or respond to something somebody else said?
Can we address the elephant in the room? Why there are no bars or restaurants?
Oh,
Why we have a 1 a.m. liquor law? Like, I've never brought this up anywhere with anybody of consequence, but what gives? Like, well, now that we're talking about this right here, can we have some discussion? We've got 24 minutes and not a lot of presentation to go. Any thoughts?
I do have one more presentation
Okay.
after this one as well. But Aaron,
I just want to point out that all of that together, if we're trying to be the hub of the valley, we're never going to become Fort Langley, and we're never going to outdo 1881 now. So what are we actually trying to accomplish? Let's be honest here. So that's where I'm coming from on arts and culture. We're going to fail if we don't have more nightlife.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
The other cities are all doing it.
and I think what I'm noting here is the connection in food and drink is up there quite a bit, and I think with good reason, and then also that nightlife. So I might keep us going because I realize I'm taking my own time from the next presentation as well.
Oh, sorry.
But no. So this one is it will show up on your phone a little bit differently. And I'm not going to pretend to be able to read all the small writing from this far away. But essentially there's different categories of placemaking. Now, this may or may not be terminology that you are familiar with and that holds meaning for you. So if it doesn't, that's totally fine. But different types of placemaking include placekeeping, which is honoring Indigenous use and history of the land, so more protecting. It's about social connections placemaking, so again, communal tables out in public spaces, really interesting seating in the public realms. So if there's one of these categories that really jumps out to you as being a priority, you can select it and we'll see a graph go up on the screen. But if there isn't any of these, if it's just, all of them equally, you can select all of them, or you can select other as well.
Describe temporary placemaking.
So like an event site,
Got it.
something pop-up,
Okay.
Temporary buskers festival, temporary event site, a very temporary mural program.
Music festival,
Yeah,
like Mission Folk Festival.
very good.
Fraser Valley Pride, in the same space. One after the other.
Been doing that for 35 years now. Folk Festival, and I always wonder why you can't get more that kind of thing in Abbotsford.
That's a huge success at Folk Festival.
We were even considered moving the festival to Abbotsford at one point. So with some favorable sites. It never happened.
Okay, now we're testing my eyesight again. But I believe it's cultural placemaking and I have to step closer for this one.
So
And social interaction placemaking that is coming out as being some of the top top ideas. Has everyone had a chance to respond to this? Okay, so there's just two more questions. And this is again a pretty high level question, but just from your perspective, your work in the community, your experiences in the community, what are some focus areas that we need to keep in mind when developing the draft recommendations and program plan?
Remember when we used to hang paper across the walls and everybody would be scribbling on giant sheets of paper, and it was a huge mess.
That's probably fun.
Fun, yeah. This is much more effective.
And the red stickers.
Oh, yeah, the whole
We still do those too, but
I
yeah.
didn't like the sticker.
Does anyone want to respond to any comments they made or other comments that you see up on the screen?
All great input. Yeah, the walkability and transit piece too, like specifically fits with the 5 big ideas. Sorry, Dave.
No problem. The question that's sort of percolating in my mind a bit, it was earlier on too, about this question about of the 33 pieces, one was from Indigenous and one was from South Asian. And the question started there, and it's still percolating, is with respect to each unique cultural group that represents our city, like for which of those cultural groups is the visual arts, for instance, less important or less pronounced than for others?
None.
None, yeah.
They all have an equal.
Why wouldn't they be?
Well, I don't know.
I think for none, yeah, they're all relevant. Look, if there's only 50 people of a specific community in Abbotsford, maybe they're not represented enough that they're going to be pushing towards wanting or having culturally significant art to contribute to the community. Not every single different person needs to be represented broadly in public art.
I hear you. I'm just, my question is a philosophical one, a general one. Are there some cultural groups that have a stronger background, a tradition of visual arts as opposed to some others, and therefore some of them will rise to the fore sooner than others? That's all I'm asking. I'm not suggesting that there is a difference, but it's just a question.
But I think think of it in the opposite way, where it's missing instead of where we have it. So oftentimes, I think when we're talking about arts and culture, and for us, heritage, and we're talking about outreach to certain groups and whatnot, we're always told that, well, it's really hard to focus on things like volunteer recruitments and stuff like that. You don't want to be a volunteer if you're hungry. And so a group can be very large and not be represented, not because they're not interested, but because they're struggling to keep, above the water. They have so many other things that they have to focus on. I think we're seeing, for example, like what Andrew was saying before about, our farmers, for example, where are they in the artwork? Well, they are busy working, and that's why they're not necessarily represented, right? And then you have like my own background with the Scandinavians that came out and dug all the dikes and everything, also not necessarily represented anywhere in terms of public art. That was a large community, Matsqui Village being, you know, the original location of what became the community eventually. And they're not represented anywhere because that's part of being Scandinavian, is that you want to fit in, you don't want to stick out, you don't want to be mentioned. So yes, we would rather that you didn't have an artwork that's dedicated to those of us who are Scandinavian community builders, because that's part of being a Scandinavian community builder.
Okay, so it does,
If you are Indigenous though, you really want to be represented.
Yeah.
That is the message that I have heard repeatedly.
oh, I'm not questioning that,
Yeah.
but you made my point, is
Yeah.
that some groups perhaps they'd rather not be represented.
Yes.
Or it seems to me it's less that they don't want to be represented, but different elements of representation are
Yes.
important to them.
Yeah.
And so actually, I think that's an opportunity, instead of thinking of it as a quota of, you know, so many representations per culture, you can think of it as a layering. You know, for Indigenous artists, environment is really important. So emphasize more in that area. For the farmers, there are going to be components of the history
Yes.
and the education of the history that's more important.
They'd rather be represented in an archives, for example, or
Sure.
donate artifacts.
Yeah, so how that representation gets.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, and just very quickly, I know we're pressed for time, but I'm
Oh,
thinking of my Dutch culture, right? And it's similar to the Scandinavians in some ways. When we wrote the book, the tapestry book for the city of Abbotsford, we couldn't find anyone. I thought maybe, but I already had a chapter, and we couldn't find anyone to write or to contribute the Dutch piece. And when I contacted a lot of the people in the community, oh, we already have a book. And and you can get it at the Dutch deli, right? Because it's more of an insular experience for them, you know, their culture and their history and how they contributed to the Fraser Valley is something that they share amongst each other. And they don't feel the need to express that outwardly in the community. It's very solid and it's very well known and very well documented. But there wasn't that much interest and so we didn't even include a chapter. And the Mennonite, of course, chapter got some significant coverage, right?
Well, they too are the quiet in the land. They don't like to draw attention to themselves.
No, but yeah. Anyway, so yeah, so you have that experience too, and that applies to art and you know, all sorts of expressions. Yeah, music. Yeah, sort of more of an insular culture.
I think it's important to give a voice to people from different cultures, regardless of what our stereotype is of their culture. And I think that gets to what Laura was saying a little bit, or builds off of that point in a way that I'm most comfortable settling on at this table, rather than coming up with a stereotype for the reason why we don't have to worry about Mano, Dutch. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Sorry, I think what's really important as well is the placemaking component of it. I mean, when I take a look at the Civic Center here, and, you know, with the reach already being here, but, you know, hearing what you're saying about food and all of that, but also like even, you know, out at New Lake or even the historic downtown or the U District, where you can have places where people can actually express themselves through performing art, whether it's in the summer or whether they're using the auditorium. You know, so looking at that type of thing too, like a black box theater, like things, throw all of those things in there. I mean, we can work that through, you know, whether there's you know, connections with the private sector that can help with some of those things when they build it into a development. You know, we're talking about maybe doing another civic plaza downtown Abbotsford, but so what are we maybe missing that we could actually, like Aaron brought that up about, you know, nightlife, like maybe there are some things that we're blind to that we just haven't considered, or we don't want people to feel that we're squashing them. I appreciate what you said about top down. That's not what this is about. This is about like, let's throw the vision wide, and then we might not achieve it all overnight, obviously. I mean, but then let's have a plan how we're going to work towards some of that. So I think that placemaking is, I think, a
so that people do feel they have a place where they can go and express themselves. And I think like for farmers too, that the whole culinary component of that, you know, I think working with Tourism Abbotsford, there's some really good opportunities for us to build that component too. But then where does that happen? And so I think we're in a really good spot with our official community plan and with our neighborhood plans. We can maybe really consider some of that. Sorry, I didn't want to prolong the discussion.
No, this is perfect. So
Can I ask a question, or like just make a suggestion in regards to that specific thing? One of the groups that we don't reach out to a lot, that because they're hard to, it's like nailing Jello to a wall, are Indigenous youth. Our nations, or local nations, they have an absolute scourge with kids leaving letters, planning their suicides, and those kinds of things. How do we get at them, right? What I've been wanting to do for a really long time is Aboriginal Arts and Culture Day, for example, right? Get the kids that come in and actually invite them. Have somebody from the city there. And then say, lay out the map and say, what are the places that are important to you? 50 years from now, those are going to be the heritage sites, right? But right now, they're culturally significant to the youth. And to say, you know, this is something we can build on. So just, you know, I think this is an important thing, is the pop-ups and all of those kinds of things that you're already doing, but it's about finding those moments when we have these insular little groups that get together and do things for those pop-ups to happen there.
yeah, so I want to tell everybody in the next update about something that won't be insular, that will be open and bringing everybody together. So maybe just quickly final comments or thoughts for this question, because this last one is just very open-ended. If there were any last final considerations to share, and we might keep this one a little bit quick.
We're going to terminate here in a few minutes.
I was going to say, maybe Tara, just advise the committee kind of what your timeline is on closing of this, because I don't want this to be the end of the conversation. If they have ideas, they want to communicate them to us.
Yes, so oftentimes when we start these conversations, you'll be home later tonight making dinner and you'll think of another great idea, or even for Anne who had to leave early. So input can come back to through the committee or
through clerks.
Through clerks, thank you. Because these are the types of conversations that are very iterative and very generative, and we all build off of each other's ideas. So please do continue to share these thoughts. We've had a very rich and fulsome conversation here, and I think we could have spent much longer. But I will cap this just in the interest of the next agenda item and respecting everyone's schedules. But please know that the open invitation to share additional thoughts that we can incorporate back into this process.
Thanks, Kara. So that takes us to item 6.5. Yes, Kara?
Yes, it does.
And I'll just, as Tara switches over, I'll maybe just apologize for the late addition of this. Some of what you'll see is kind of online in the public realm, and when the original agenda went out, we weren't 100% sure that we were ready to go for it, but now that we are, we want to share it with the committee. So.
This is really cool.
Okay. Kitty, I think it was just in the bottom. You had it open, the Culture Services update.
There you go.
There we go. Oh.
No. Right. One forward.
There we go. Okay, now I might have to do some fast talking.
Yeah.
So pleased to be here again to share a bit of a Culture Services update. So there's a few different initiatives that we're happy to share with the committee today. And these are two new initiatives for the One Stop Shop program and the new Arts and Culture Roundtable, which I've been alluding a little bit throughout the public art conversation. So the One Stop Shop program, just really quickly, stems from the Culture Connect strategy. It was one of the 5 big moves from that strategy, and we have developed 2 new websites to help support arts, events, and heritage organizers to increase capacity in the cultural sector, and also to better communicate all of the amazing events, programs, and activities that Abbotsford has to offer. So I'm going to do a very quick show and tell between these 2 guides. Okay, and Katie, I may ask for your help clicking through and I'll direct you. So this page is a brand new online resource guide specifically tailored for arts, culture, and heritage event and program organizers. We worked in collaboration with folks from the Arts Council, from Heritage Abbotsford Society, and many others to be able to pull together a pretty comprehensive online guide with 8 different topics of information that are tailored specifically to arts, events, and heritage organizers. So the first category there, Katie, if you don't mind clicking on it, hosting an event in the city. So we have a listing here of all of the different spaces, if you scroll down, that can be used to host, hosting an event in the city. This is for the resources of online information, guides, both city delivered and externally, for everything that you need to know for how to plan a festival event, including a very comprehensive, the BC Major Planned Events Guidelines, which details every element of an event. And Katie, if you click back to the bottom related links, that will take us back. And then we also run through event funding opportunities. These are for arts or cultural activities, heritage, any event. So we talk about the City of Abbotsford funding opportunities. And if you scroll down the site, we also have, if you click on the plus icons there, Katie, we have a very comprehensive listing of local listings for funding opportunities, provincial-wide, and also national funding opportunities. So we've listed everything in one space so that it's really easily accessible for everyone to find. We also have event promotional opportunities with a link to the Go Abbotsford webpage, which I'm going to show you more momentarily. Also local calendars and listings, and connections to local and regional media outlets that offer free opportunities to promote upcoming events and activities. Aaron, you'll notice Civil Radio is on there as well. Yes. Okay, networking and learning opportunities. So part of increasing capacity is also about getting together and sharing ideas, information, and resources, and really connecting with folks who are looking to do similar work in the community. So we have a listing through each of those drop-down menus of local, provincial, and regional networking and learning groups. And then Katie, if you scroll up on the left-hand side, you'll also see a promotion for the first Arts and Culture Roundtable that's being held at the Open Space on April 25th in the evening. And this idea, we are co-chairing this with the library. Every year, myself and one of the fee-for-service cultural organizations, one of the big executive directors, will co-chair these roundtables. And it's really focused on networking, learning, and sharing. So this will be the kickoff event. We've already had great RSVPs for it, and we're hoping that through this committee, you can help spread this opportunity through your networks as well. And a chance for everybody to come together, learn, share, and collaborate. And then if we go back, we also have comprehensive list of planning resources, including planning tools and templates. And what we've actually done on this as well is we've actually created a template for how to create an invoice. That's something we hear from artists quite a bit. Can you send us an invoice? Can you send me what an invoice looks like? We've also created budget templates on here, so if somebody is new to hosting an event or an activity, they can learn how to do that, as well as national cultural and remuneration standards, so CARFAC, so about inequitable payment, copyright and moral rights, and also research and resources for the social and economic impacts of the arts. So some of those conversations we were having earlier about the value of arts out in the community, we're really helping to get that knowledge and information into the hands of the cultural sector so that when they're applying for that grant or that sponsorship, they can help make that case for the work that they do. We've also got a listing of the different spaces where events or activities can be held in Abbotsford, as well as studio for artist making spaces. And then we've also listed the community halls as well too, because those are also great flexible pop-up performance spaces. Volunteer resources, so many events and activities rely heavily on volunteers for the success of their event. So we have a very comprehensive guide here running all the way through pre-event planning, and Katie, you can just scroll the whole way through and we'll go back. Volunteer recruitment, how to thank and appreciate volunteers afterwards, to help guide new event organizers. And then artist and entertainer calls. So we also wanted to have a centralized location where we can promote current calls for city programs, such as the current artists in residence that we're partnering with the Abbotsford Arts Council on, and also a submission form so that if somebody is an artist or an entertainer out in the community and they may be interested in future calls, they can also just send us their information and we'll keep their information on file. So that was a super quick run through of the new arts and events organizer resources. And I'll very quickly as well show you the other piece of this one-stop shop program is the brand new Go Abbotsford online activities and events calendar. So this calendar is a joint project between the City of Abbotsford and Tourism Abbotsford. Tourism Abbotsford will be managing this calendar. And it lists all of the different events and activities happening in the community. It's searchable by visual arts, by music, by community connections, by culture and heritage. And we just announced this yesterday. Yes, it's very, very recently launched. And so Tourism Abbotsford is also going to be doing, actively reaching out to pretty much everyone around this table who has different events or activities to be able to populate the calendar as well. And Katie, if you just scroll up to the very top and just hover over community events, you'll see it's listed. There's sections of the calendar that don't have the sports activities on there. There's all the arts and culture activities there. And then we also have the different tabs at the top, so you can also sort by venue. So events happening at the TradeX are also at the Abbotsford Centre as well. Yes, and if you scroll down, Katie, to the bottom left-hand side of the corner of the page where the English is, the web page is also translatable if you click the arrow. So into different languages. All of the images also have the ability to convert to text for those that may have visual impairments. And then all of the activities can also be printed off in a schedule. So there's a print icon on the top right-hand corner. So it's also print friendly as well too.
This is wonderful. Wow.
That was a very quick.
Yes, thanks. You did an awesome job, especially on the last part of the agenda item. So I'm not going to throw the floor open to questions or to further discussion. I think we've overstayed our welcome, or we've kept you longer than you were asked to stay originally. I appreciate your indulgence, and I'm sure we're going to hear some more on some of this. Thanks to the staff for action-packed 2 hours. And so with that, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn. Matthew, seconded by John. We're all in favor, I'm sure. So we are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I wish we had this like before COVID. I did.
I'm so sorry.
I guess I could have